So if we're going to dig into group decision making, everybody says, oh, groups make better decisions than individuals do. This is mostly true. The things that groups provide you are large knowledge pool, diversity in approaches, commitment to the decision. I was once asked to be on a panel in our school district to help make decisions about the bond issue that they were going to have people vote on. And I thought I was being honored to be on this panel, and then I got there and there was about 75 people on the panel, and what they were doing was they were trying to get everybody's commitment to the decision, and then that commitment to flow out to the community so people would vote for the bonds. So by involving more people and involving groups, it's easier to get people to buy into that decision. Better understanding of the decision rationale, so if people are there, they see it, they'll know why that decision was made in that way. And then visible role modeling about the decision, about why it was made and how to make decisions. What are the disadvantages? Well, when people come in, then there are social pressures, there are popularity contests, there are people have power struggles with one another. Then there's the potential for few participants to be dominant. The extroverts tend to speak up. The introverts tend to draw back. There tends to be goal displacement. So people have ulterior motives or secondary goals that they may or may not share with the group. So when we go back to the example of your company buying vehicles, it's you have a friend who is the Ford dealer, or the Ford dealer has taken you on a trip, or somebody on a trip within your organization, or taken you to a Thunder game or something along those lines. And then we have decision-making problems like groupthink. The one that we all think about the most and are familiar with is groupthink. Groupthink is very clearly the failure to manage disagreement. Groupthink occurs when members become deeply involved in a cohesive in-group, or they're striving for unanimity overrides motivation to realistically appraise alternative courses of action. So what does that mean? Well, let's go back to the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster and talk about how that happened, why that happened. Well, there are a number of reasons why that happened. The space shuttle had not really had any major failures prior to that, so they had a sense of invulnerability. We can't make a bad decision. There were people who, down at the bottom of that list served as mind guards or self-censorship. There are other things that came into play there that caused some of these things to happen. If you are old enough to remember, the original plan for the space shuttle was that it was going to launch on a weekly basis. They thought they could get the space shuttle to where they could have a weekly launch. It would go up, it would go to the space station, it would go to do some experiments, it would launch things, work on things, and then it would come back and it would land, and we had 4 space shuttles, I think, and they were going to rotate, and they would be able to launch them on a weekly or monthly basis. So that didn't happen. There were lots of delays, there were lots of cost overruns, and so there was lots and lots of pressure to launch. And so that caused lots of these other things like rationalization, self-censorship, stereotyped views of the opposition. What does that mean? Well, if there's somebody in the group who tends to quite often question what's going on with the group or the decisions, people say, oh, he or she's just a naysayer, we don't need to pay attention to him or her. Oh, they always just serve as a devil's advocate. They don't like new ideas. They are the old school person, but we need to listen to those people because they help protect us from groupthink. So what are those causes? Again, outside pressures such as, oh, sorry, I clicked on there. Outside pressures such as budgets or time or prior failures that we're trying to overcome. Peer pressure from the inside of the group or the outside of the group. Rationalization. Well, what happened with the Space Shuttle Challenger was, if you go back and watch the documentary about it, somebody said, well, we don't know, the O-rings have never been tested below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, so they might fail. So I remember somebody else on the engineering crew said, well, you don't know that they're going to fail. You just say that they could fail. So they rationalized away that information and said that you don't know that it's not going to work. You just don't know anything. So they rationalize that information and said, we'll be fine, it'll be fine. We've been close to freezing before, so it should work. Then we have complacency, people taking the moral high ground. They say, you know, well, we're doing what's right, and we're more moral than you are. Stereotyping those people, censorship, pressure, whether that is censorship through pressure or through censoring people by physically deleting information or omitting information from the decision-making process, or creating an illusion of unanimity, so making it seem like everybody is on the same page. So that's what groupthink is and sort of the causes of it. What makes individual groups vulnerable to groupthink is a need to maintain harmony, wanting everybody to get along, or a homogeneous group, a group that is made up by people who all maybe think the same, are trained the same, have the same expertise. Maybe they're all engineers, or they're all accountants, or they're all marketing people, or they're all, you know, natural gas people or oil people or landmen or whatever group that happens to be. That's why we quite often have cross-functional teams to help make better decisions. People who get along too well don't tend to want to rock the boat. Or if there are no clear rules and or processes, can cause information to be ignored and people to make decisions in which some people disagree with it, but they just go along with the group. I had an example of this. I own a property management and investment company, and I have a partner in that, and we made a clear decision rule about a property that if we could get the lease extended on the property, that we would then buy that property. Well, we moved into the contract phase. We paid for an appraisal and a survey, and then we thought we would be able to negotiate with the tenant and extend that lease, and we couldn't get it to happen. And then I started to rationalize the decision and say, well, we really don't need to pay attention to our rules because it's still a good buy and it still should be good. Ultimately, my business partner, as well as my business partner and my wife, two different people, said, what was your original decision-making rule on this? Well, if we could get the lease extended, we would go ahead and buy the property. But then, and they said to me, well, did you get the lease extended? I said, oh, no, but it's still a good buy. And my wife and my business partner said, well, what's going to happen if that lease comes up in a year and you still have to make the payment on this property and you're not able to lease it out? And so we ultimately ended up backing up, and I was like, well, but we already spent money on an appraisal and on a survey, and that, much like the Shoreham nuclear power plant, was sunk costs. We had to look forward and decide whether it was a good purchase or not, and ultimately we pulled out of the purchase and lost a few $1,000s, but it was much better than losing tens of thousands of dollars. Sometimes groups are vulnerable to groupthink because of an outspoken leader. Then other people don't want to speak up and question that leader. Or if it's an isolated group, they don't have outside information coming in, and so they're not able to question the information. Now,